Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Nedarim Daf Yud Tes, we're going to begin on the top of Yud Testament off the top line. So we ended off in yesterday's daf explaining a stira, a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Mishnah in Masechtas Taharos. The Mishnah here says that Stam Nedarim L'Hachmer, when it comes to a situation where we're not sure exactly what this person meant, so we go strict, and we assume that he's actually trying to make himself a neder to the point that he will end up, it'll be usher this item. Now the problem is that in Taharos, it said that Safek Nazirus L'Hakel, and Nazirus is comparable to Nedarim. So is it that we're lenient or restrict? So we ended up leaving off that it's based on a machlokus, Rabbi Lezer and the Rabbanan. When a person is makdish, let's say his domesticated animals, all of them, and he has a koi in his midst, which is a safek chai, safek behema, is that included? Does a person include a safek together with all the other animals? So if you hold that you do include a safek, so that will be like the opinion of our Mishnah that says that we go strict in the case of a safek. However, when it says Savik Nazir Hakel, that is according to the opinion that says no, the koi is not included, it's not hektish, because a person would not include a suffix animal, your possessions, and certainly not a suffix on yourself. So let's continue now, as we said in New Testament. So b'mai kimta. So how are we establishing this case? Well, Savik Nazir Hakel Rabbi Lezer. We're saying that the reason why, if a person is not sure, did he accept himself Nazirus? This person came by, if he's a Nazir, I'll be a Nazir, and you have no idea as he left. So we go lenient and we say this person is not going to be a Nazir because, just like Rabbi Lezer, who says when it comes to the koi, it's not going to be kodesh. So Ema Seifa. The problem is if you continue learning those Mishnayos and Masechtas Taharos, the fourth parak, it says later on as follows: Safek Bechoros. If let's say you have a doubt when it comes to a bechor, a firstborn animal, echad bechori adam, echad bechori behema. Not just when it comes to the firstborn animal, but also whether or not your child is a bechor, bein temeya, bein tahora. Whether or not we're talking about an animal which is temeya, in which therefore we'd be talking about the chiva peta chamor, bein tahara, having to give the first animal away. So the din is hamoitzim mechaver alav haraya. So what does that mean? So let's look at Rashi. Let's look at the Ran rather. The seif for the Safek Bechoros, when it comes to Bechoros, kivan de memainahu. This is your money. This is your animal. So I'm reading de ma'ayil inish memainah l'sveika. So is it that we say that a person is going to put his money into a Safek? El wadidach deloy shani loch ben gufel memainah kasha. So again, I'm not reading this whole thing, but if you want to say that maybe there's a distinction between a person's possessions and a person himself, so maybe you could therefore make that distinction and say when it comes to Mamoina Lasfeka, there is an Isser of Giza Vavoda in this case. So why is there an Isser of Giza Vavoda? It's because the din is that because when it comes to a suffix, we're going to be strict. So the Kohen again has in this case would have to prove it's a bechor. Otherwise, the Baal keeps it a suffix. So that's what it says over here. The Tani Lava Asur Begiz Vavoida. That's goof of the point. If you look in Rashi, Alpha Bishul Hayavadai, even though it's a suffix, Alma suffix Kadshim Chumra. We see that we do go strict over here. So why would it be that it's Asur Begiz Vavoida? So therefore, if that's the case, that we're strict, how can we say, oh, it's like Rabbi Lezer? Oh, because something is here is hakel. But what do you mean? Rabbi Lezer says things that were lenient. But when it comes to, when Rabbi Lezer says, we're not going to be makdish the koi, but suffix, Kanshim or Lakula, but we see that's not the case. We see that we are strict. That's why it's Asur Begiz Vavoida. So even when it comes to the suffix, we're strict. So Malay Amaika Madami medamis kedusha haba mialeho kedusha haba b'di adam. You shouldn't compare them to a kedusha which comes later on, as opposed to a kedusha that just happens on itself, which is the case of a bechor. Says the Ran, because mishum de kedusha haba b'di adam hu. When it comes to a kedusha that comes onto a person, deikla meimer de hai gavra loy gamer lui nafshi umamayna l'sveika. When it comes to the person making that decision, so that person may not want to put doubt into the equation. So, since he's the one that has the right to be mocked as something, or not being mocked as something. So like Rabbi Eliezer, he says that person will, in a case of doubt, not be mocked as that koi. However, says the Ran of Kedusha Haba B'di Shemayim, which is a Bechor, it's born, it's Kaddish Merechem, Leiko Memerhachi, the Atu Biyadehu. So we're only machmir here because Bechor is a case of B'di Shemayim. But if it's a person's hands, we are makel. So the truth is, it still could be like Rabbi Eliezer, and it's not going to necessarily be a question. El ikasha hakasha, safik mashkin latame tame latame acherim tahar divra meir. So if you have something which is safik mashkin, and the Ran says kagoin shahishit tami yado lebein hamashkin, a person who is tummy put his hands into a liquid, we don't know if he actually touched the liquid. So now we don't know the status of this liquid. So we say like this, Latame Tame, Kaloimer says the Ran, Latumas Atzman Azil Chumra. To say then in itself is Tame, or Posel, yes, of a little Tame Cherim. So again, it has like the status of being apostling something, which then in itself, the item becomes impure, but doesn't have the capacity to make other things impure. So that is Divra Meir. That's how Rabbi Meir interprets it. Rabbi Eliezer says the same thing. Is it true that Rabbi Eliezer holds by a case of a suffix? Because again, this person put his tummy hands somewhere in the proximity of this liquid. We don't know if he touched the liquid, so it's a suffix. So he'll still say by a suffix that it's tummy. He says there is no tuma at all midiraisa. Teda shahari hayed, and this is brought down many times. Hayed yosi ben yoezer isreida al ayil kamsa dachan. Now, when it comes to this particular type of a grasshopper, which is a chagav, that it is a kosher grasshopper, a person's allowed to eat it. V'al mashkin based mitbachaya dachan. There's a question exactly what this is referring to, but the liquid which comes pashib shop from the slaughterhouse, that is something which is also kosher. Says the Ran, the kivan the tumas mashkin b'Rabbanan, because when it comes to tumas mashkin, the whole din is the Rabbanan. But mashkin be'mitbachaya, when it comes to the liquids in the slaughterhouse, will gozer. We're not going to be geyser. Shul harbus tuma be'azara. This is talking about in the Beis Hamikdash, and we don't want, in the case of doubt, to start making things tameh, which obviously we want everything in the Beis Hamikdash to be tahar. Kivan tumas mashkin b'Rabbanan. So if in fact tumas mashkin is only the Rabbanan, heichem achmirin b'sveikayu. How could we even think that we would go strict when it comes to a suffix? So that is the framework of this question. So hanicha l'shmol di'amar dachan mulatami acherim. So again, over there it discusses what exactly this is referring to. The last few blot in the first parak, which talks a lot about Tumat Tahara. So according to Shmuel, that says Dachan Mulatami Acherim. It means it doesn't have the ability to make other things Tami, Avol Tumas Atzman, Yesh Behen Shaper. But in itself does become Tami, then that's fine. El Rav Diamar Dachan Mamish Malkim Eimar. It means that it's completely tahar, even the thing itself. So the Tana can't be like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says, well, tami tame, that it does become tami itself. But over here, according to Rav, he says that it's completely tahar. So Elo Harav Yehuda v'Harav Shimon. Therefore, we have to instead say that the way to answer the stira, whether or not when it comes to a suffix neder, if we're strict or lenient, between our Mishnah and one in Taharos, is actually a different machlokas. A person makes the declaration that if the silo in front of me contains the measurement of 100 core, then I will become a nazir. So, of course, your first step is to get into that silo and to count how much grain you have there. And he did exactly that. But he went. However, it turned out that the grain was either lost or stolen, which means he has no idea what the status is. So since it's a suffix, whether the pile had that amount, the question is, what do we do? Do we make him into a nazir, or are we makel? So Rabbi Huda matir. Rabbi Huda says, when it comes to suffix neder, is lahakil, which is like the Mishnah in Taharos. Rabbi Shimon oiser. So our Mishnah can be like Rabbi Shimon that says that it'll be aser. So that, and again, why is it aser? Because suffix is lahachmer. Because maybe there was 100 kur in that silo. For Rabbi Yehuda, we ask a stira to Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter because he's lenient. He's lenient b'suffix. Is it true that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a person does not include something which is in doubt? In other words, is it true that Rabbi Yehuda is lenient? Because like in this case, we're saying about the 100 kur that he's lenient and this person is not a nazir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam Truma Yehuda Asura. We mentioned at the end of our Mishnah, yesterday's daf, that when it comes to Truma, even though we're not sure what does this person mean, it could mean one of two things, as the Mishnah said. It's possible it could be talking about Trumas Halishka, which you're donating the shkolim, and which is considered davar hanadar, so therefore it would be oiser. It's possible, which is of course Beis HaMikdash connected, or it's possible that you just meant shel geirin, in your field, which is talking about something which is a davar ha'aser, and therefore because of that the neder would not work. So we end up saying, according to Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, that it depends where you're located. If you're in Yehuda, which is really close to the Beis HaMikdash, so it's aser, because you probably had in mind for the Trumas Halishka, and therefore it's considered to be a davar hanadar. However, if you lived in Galil, so the din is that it's aser. The din is it's going to be mutter, because you're so far away. You're probably thinking not about the Trumas Halishka, but rather they're talking about the geirin, and therefore that's why it'll be mutter. So, Yehuda Stam Truma Yehuda Sur V'Gol Muteres Sheinan Shegol Makirnes Trumas Halishka. As again, when they said it, they're not thinking about the Trumas Halishka, in which would be a davar hanadar, which would make the thing aser, because they don't live near the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Taima, the whole reason why Rabbi Yehuda says this statement is the ein makirin, is because the people that live so far away don't have the mindset or thinking that it's Trumas Halishka. Let's quickly look, before we turn the daf, at this Ran. So let's turn the daf. Ha makirin asurin. So this is going to be a question that if they would know that they're in the basin, they would be thinking about Trumas Halishka, that it would work, because that would be enough. And if you look in Rashi, then we'll go back to the Ran, which is going to be like a question. Ve'afal gav the bestam neder. This is a question where it's unclear. The suffix ibetrumas halishki, ibetrumas agarin, demal inish nafshel seika. So we see that he really will include something which is somewhat suffix related, and we'll say no. He actually means it to become aser bevadai. So it must be that he holds like that, because the only reason he says not to that goal would be mutter is dafka because they live far away. But if, let's say, that wasn't the issue, that they are makir trumas halishka, there's still a suffix. It's still possible that's not what they were thinking. Nonetheless, we still say a person would put a suffix as a vadai. And how, therefore, can we say that Rabbi Yehuda holds, as we mentioned just a few moments ago, that he says that if you have this 100 kur so Rabbi Yehuda says, oh, you don't know if it's there, don't worry, you're not a nazir. Suffix is a hakil. What do you mean? We see from our Mishnah you should hold l'chumra. So let's look at this Ran. Hi the makshim mediyuka the seifa v'li parich megufa the reisha. The reason why he's asking a question on the end of the Mishnah, the Gatani Stam Truma B'Yehuda Asura, Alma Sveiku L'Chumra. So why isn't he saying like that? It says that Stam Truma B'Yehuda Asura, that when it comes in Yehuda, why is it talking about Gol? When it's talking about Yehuda, that when we're unsure, we assume because Yehuda is close to the Beis HaMikdash, it's Aser. Alma Sveiku L'Chumra. Why don't you just say from there? Why do you have to bring the case of Golil, Frek the Ran? Well, you should just bring it from over here. So he says, Mishum De'ikam with Chuya Dereisha Hainu Taimim Mishum the Anshi Yehuda Mitaisha Hay Yisra Gilin Betrumas Alishka Letrumas Hagairin Lokari Letrumas Stam. Because they're so close to the base of Mikdash, it's not even like a suffix anymore. It's like almost for sure they meant the Trumas Halishka. Hilkach ki nadri betruma vanday ketrumas halishka nadri. So it's interesting. So the Ran beautifully explains that's the reason why the kasha of the stira of Rabbi Yehuda is dafka when it comes to Golil, because when it comes to Yehuda, it's not a case of, you would almost maybe say it's not a case of a suffix. So let's continue now in Your Testament base. So Amar Rava, Gabi Kri, when it comes to this case of the pile, Rabbi Yehuda is lenient and says, you know what, we don't know how much was in there, so we're just going to say suffix l'hakel. Ksavar, he holds like this. Kol shesveko chomer mevadai. Anytime you have a suffix in which the suffix is more strict than the vadai, lo ma'il nafshi l'sveka. That much we're not going to do. A person is not going to link a suffix and say that for sure I also had in mind that. And we're going to be more lenient, because if you ever find that a suffix is so strict, even more than being vade a nazir, so then we're not going to say that a suffix is going to be lahachmer. So therefore, when it comes to a vade nazir, so even though you're definitely a nazir, but there's still a leniency. What's that? The gabi nazir vade megaleach maybe karv menechel. Because once you're a nazir, so if you were for sure a nazir, stam nazir shleishim yoyim, that's it. You serve your time, bring your karbanos, and then you can eat. However, when it comes to al sveko lo matzah megaleach, if this nazir who is a suffix, so in this situation, we're not going to allow him just to simply be megaleach, because we don't know if necessarily he really was a nazir. So therefore, because of that, we find that there's a chumrah of being a suffix more than a vade nazir. So when it comes to that type of a situation, so we do not assume that's why by suffix nazirus is a hakil, because when it comes to a suffix by nazirus, we're so strict because the laws are so much more strict. We don't just say that you're free to bring karbanos and that's the end, because it's a suffix. So by suffix, you can't just start bringing karbanos in the base of mikdash. So Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Omer Hareini Nazir Oyla Mai. Whatever person makes himself into a Nazir Oylam, Nazir Oylam isn't bringing karbanos. You're Nazir forever. So if you're Nazir forever, so we don't find any distinction. Or if we say suffix naziris lahakel l'charetz, even by nazir oilam. So I'm no nazir oilam nami sveka chomer mavada. It's not true. Even when it comes to being a vadai nazir, that is still more lenient, even though you're a nazir forever, than in case of a suffix. Why? Deal vadai hichvid sar mekel batar maybe shosh behemus. That if your hair starts growing really long, even though you're still Nazir Olam, we are lenient and we allow you to cut your hair every so often. And then afterwards you bring karbanos. Ve'ilu sveika lo. When it comes to a suffix, we'll not allow you to trim your hair if it gets too long. So we're strict even there. So 1 second, that's only by Nazir Olam. Amar Hareini Nazir Shimshin Mai. So look at Rashi, and this is going to be TA 24, TA 24, which says, "B'mas suffix nazir oilum chamer mavadai." So why is it we didn't do nazir shimshin? But why is suffix nazir oilum chamer mavadai? This is what I wrote. Since a suffix nazir, if he wants to galeach, cut his hair, he can't ever cut his hair to bring a carbon, but bavada, he could bring and cut his hair, fine. So basically, again, if his hair grows long, we're lenient in that situation. All right, that's basically what I think I kind of got to that. So that was TA 24. Okay, TA 24. Let me write that down. TA 24. Okay, so again, that hichbitzaro mekel batar maybe shosh behemos. Fine. So the question now that we're asked is, how about a nazir shimshin? Hareini nazir shimshin mai. So by a nazir shimshin, the lo megolech oilum, he's never allowed to cut his hair, klal at all. So Michael Maimer, my kamer Yehuda mutter, by a case of suffix, because you can cut your hair, and when it comes to a Nazir Shimshin, you're never allowed to cut your hair, even if your hair gets long. So Malay, Samar says it's a good point, but Nazir Shimshin Lotanya, the Brisa wasn't referring to this. So the Mishnah, when it says suffix Nazir Sohakel, even though it's true, that may not necessarily apply to a Nazir Shimshin, but that's really an uncommon situation, where Stam's situation is a regular Nazir, or maybe even a Nazir Oilam they would make. But it does say it. So what am I supposed to say? If it says it, it says it. So look in the Ran. Okay, so you can say that you're right, even though it's a standard Rabbi Yehuda, so you can say it's two Tanoim believe Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Rav Ashi Omer Hahi Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rav Tarfin He. The same Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rav Tarfin Omer in Echnehem Nazir Lefi Shol Nidna Nazirus El Hafla, which is what I was macham last time, is that neither of them are Nazir because it has to be Hafla. So what is that case? It's a very famous case, but let's look in the Ran anyway. Tanan law, so it says, Bishnayim Shahoyim Mahalchim Derech. You have two people traveling, walking around the street. Bro Echad Balkanegin. They see some guy coming by them. Oimer Echad Mehem Harein Nazir Shazeish Ploini. So he says, I'm going to be a Nazir that this guy, he is a Nazir. Omer Chavero Harein Nazir She'enoi. I'll be a Nazir if he's not. So one of them has got to be, right? One saying, I'll be a Nazir if he is. And the other one says, I'll be a Nazir if I'm not. So if Tarf and Oimer in Echnehem Nazir, neither of them are Nazir. And Rabbi Yehuda says the reason you have to explain it shloshim tanai without any type of condition or not knowing. Veloshi kabel oisal suffix, because you're not mimikabel the suffix. There is no such thing as suffix nazirus. That a person who is masafik, it doesn't work. It has to be with clarity. Hilkach Brisa the Amar Hareini Nazir Shimshin. So he says that's not considered to be like a Nazir. Okay. So why does it say the case that it was stolen or lost? What's the whole significance of adding that? So, let's see, if you look in the Rashi, it says Misham Hachi Mater the Lord Ninal El Hafla. So why is it mentioned Nignav? I feel Isa Be'ene, even if it's right here in front of us. Nami Kivan de Mishas Neder. When you said it, Lo Havi Borule, you didn't know. Lo Havi Yada, you didn't know if Havi Be Meyakor. Afal Gab de Havi Efshilu Moidan. Even though let's say you could always measure it later on, that's not Lahafla, so that shouldn't work. So Elo Hadich Kechad Rav Shimon. It's coming to tell you the strength of Rav Shimon. The Afal Gav de Nignav Shavad. Even if it was stolen or lost, Ksavar Mile Inish Nafshila Sveka. Even in that situation would work. So that means that he doesn't hold a Lahafla. Okay. Question 11 and TV 25. So let's look at question 11. Harein Nazim Yesh B'Kri Hazeh Me'er Kur. Rehuda Mater. So Masvar should be Huda Mater M'Nazir Staf Sfirli Stam Nazir Staf Nedarim L'Hachmer. So either from the reason anything which is a suffix is more strict than a vadai, lo mile nashil sake. A person would not put himself into would not link the doubt to make it asa to him because it's too much. Or lefi shlo nitnan b'naziris el hafla below tanai v'safek. Naziris has to be without a doubt. Okay. So hamakir and asurin. So this is what we mentioned before in the Ran, really. The Rabbi Yehuda says that stam truma b'Yehuda. We assume when we're talking about truma, let's go back to this Mishnah, that when it comes to truma, it's aser because they live near the Beis Hamikdash. So more than likely they're talking about trumas halishka. So the Gemara says ha makirin. Let's say, so that's Yehuda. But again, in Golil, they're not makir, so therefore they don't know about the trumas halishka. So therefore it's mutter, which is hamakir and asurin. If the people in Golil would know about the lishka saga, about the trumas lishka, then it would be aser. So alma sveika l'chumra. So we see we're strict. So yema seifa stam charam and bihuda mutarim v'gol asurin she'enan shegol makirin es charmi hakohanim. When it comes to the Charmi the Kohanim have rights to it. So that's actually, if you would live near the base of Mikdash, like in Yehuda, it would be mutter, because your neder doesn't really mean anything, because the Charmi Kohanim is something which is allowed. So Hamakir and Maturin. If let's say they did recognize it, there would be mutter, almost fake l'kula. So which is it? Is it Safek l'chom or Safek l'kula? Because if you live near the base of Mikdash, in one aspect, you could remember the Trumas Alishka, in which will aser, the neder will work. However, if we're talking about Charamim, then living near the base of Mikdash, you would think about Charmi Kahuna, which is mutter. So, Amabaya, Seifa Rabbi Lezer Bar Tzadiki. The Seifa is Rabbi Lezer Bar Tzadik. The sign Yehuda Eimer Stam Truma Yehuda Asura. Rabbi Yehuda Ben Tzadik Eimer Stam Charamim Megoel Asurin. Adka.